I still remember that morning. It was one of those crisp, perfect October days in Chicago, cold enough to wear my favorite camel wool coat, but sunny enough to feel alive. I caught my reflection in the revolving doors of the Lakeview Tower where I've worked for the past 26 years and thought, damn, not bad for 62. I walked in the way I always do, confidently, heels clicking on the polished floors, Starbucks in one hand, and my signature red lipstick just right. Morning, Chase. I nodded to the security guard who always insists on calling me ma'am, even though I told him to knock it off in 2009. Morning, Marcy, said Linda from accounting. Love the coat, I gave her a wink. I liked my rituals. Same elevator, same 22nd floor, same office with the fake ficus tree I refused to throw out even though it lost half its plastic leaves. I built that office. Not the walls, maybe, but everything else. Every system, every template, every process that kept this place from imploding. At 9:17, just as I was opening an Excel spreadsheet that only I knew how to operate, I got an email. Subject line: HR. Please come by as soon as possible. No emoji, no context, just as soon as possible. I felt my stomach drop the way it does when you realize you forgot your phone in an Uber or your kid just said, "We need to talk." I took a breath, took a sip of lukewarm latte. Told myself it was probably nothing. It was not nothing. The HR office used to be a storage closet. Now it's been renovated into a minimalist hellscape, all white walls, frosted glass, and a potted succulent someone probably waters with tears. "Hi, Marta," said Rachel from HR 29, I think. Recently promoted. Always wears shoes that look like they were made by a yoga instructor with a glue gun. Sitting next to her was Jonathan, the new director of Strategic People Optimization, or whatever they're calling it this year. Jonathan smiled like he was about to offer me a coupon. "Marta," he said, folding his hands like a TED Talk was about to begin, "we want to thank you for your many years of service." Well, that's never a good opener. They used a lot of words. Words like restructuring, future-facing, alignment, generational refresh. They didn't say fired. They didn't say retired. They didn't say goodbye. But somewhere between Rachel nodding empathetically and Jonathan handing me an envelope, I realized exactly what this was. "You're saying I'm too old." I didn't say it out loud, but I thought it. Loudly. Instead, I smiled, nodded, took the envelope, didn't give them the satisfaction of a scene. And then Rachel, bless her corporate heart, actually said, "It's just that we're really looking for a fresh perspective." Fresh perspective? Honey, I invented the playbook you're now using to train interns. I've handled accounts during 3 recessions, 2 CEO divorces, and 1 international data breach that almost got us sued by the Canadian government. But sure, let's get someone with a TikTok account and a Canva Pro subscription. Of course, I didn't say that either. I just stood up, straightened my coat, gave them both the kind of look you give someone who just told you that oat milk is revolutionary. "Thank you for your time," I said, like a damn Oscars speech. Walking back to my office was the hardest part. People knew. I could see it in their eyes, the way Sarah from design suddenly found something very interesting on the carpet. Or how Brad, who I once covered for during his divorce, turned away so fast you'd think I was the ghost of fiscal quarters past. Nobody looked at me. Nobody said a word. And then I saw Jenna. Jenna, the junior analyst I mentored for 2 years, looked right at me and mouthed, "I'm so sorry." That almost got me. But I didn't let it. I walked into my office, grabbed my things, not all of them, just what mattered. My framed photo from the company retreat in 2003 where we actually beat the Seattle office in softball. My world's okayest boss mug that Tim gave me. And the ficus, of course. I carried it out like it was a crown. As the elevator doors closed, I looked at my reflection again. Same woman, same coat, but something shifted. I was no longer Marta, head of operational strategy. I was unemployed, discarded, outdated, like an old software update they forgot was still running everything behind the scenes. And yet I felt something else too. Not sadness, not yet, not even anger. It was curiosity. What now? Because if you think my story ends with a cardboard box and a sad walk to the parking lot, honey, you haven't been paying attention. The day I was driving home after that HR meeting, with my coat, a box, and a ficus on the back seat, it was like a movie started playing before my eyes. Only it wasn't a Hollywood one, it was real. Mine! The first scene, 1987, Manhattan, New York. I'm 24. My hair is shoulder-length curls, my shoulders padded like aircraft carriers. I'm sitting in a tiny office next to a fax machine screeching like it's undergoing surgery without anesthesia. My desk is a mess of papers, reports, bills, and green sticky notes. I'm not even sure what I was hired to do, but by day 3, everyone is already bringing me their problems. You stayed past midnight again? Asks Joan, the one who still handled HR manually back then. Business doesn't build itself, I reply, without looking up from a page full of numbers. I had no MBA, no mentor, no family connections, just a tape recorder, a stack of files, and a constantly dying pager, and a good head on my shoulders. When others had questions, I already had Plan B and a backup Plan C, just in case. By the late 90s, I was running a department, 2 phones on my desk, a Palm Pilot in my bag, a week's worth of meetings scheduled like a cabinet minister. No Zoom back then, no Google Docs. We made PowerPoint presentations, printed them in color, and crossed the city to hand them to clients in person. Where there's a send button now, we had taxis and 5-minute pit stops in restaurant bathrooms. I remember closing my first big deal, a 6-figure supply contract. My name was in the final paperwork. That was the first time I truly felt, yes, I'm part of something big. But there were hard times too. 2001. 2008. We lost clients, people, budgets, and still, we got back up. I rebuilt teams, wrote new strategies, cut costs, trained the new hires. Again and again, I delivered. I remember in 2015, we got a new director. Young, ambitious, sneakers and slogans like, "Let's think outside the box." He wanted to move all reporting to Slack. I joked, "Sure, let's do that. Just tell me who's going to explain to the auditors where the search button is." He didn't laugh, and I knew I'd be the one saving the project a month later. When you've been in this profession for over 30 years, you start seeing the cycles, the waves, the trends. First, everyone's obsessed with Agile, then Scrum. And then one day you realize that old Excel spreadsheet from 1999 still works better than half the trendy platforms out there. And I knew that because I lived it, not in theory and practice. Through sleepless nights, through 3 a.m. phone calls, "Martha, everything's down." Through tears in the kitchen and champagne in the boardroom. I grew with this job, with every new challenge, every report no one wanted to do, and I did it. Not because I had to, but because I understood. If not me, then who? And above all, I never lost respect. For the work, for the people, for the time. Even when everything went digital, fast, young, I didn't resist. I learned. I listened. I kept pace. Only no one tells you that you can keep pace and still be left behind. No explanations, no respect. Just because you're not the type to take selfies in the conference room. But you know, driving home that day, I remembered all of it and I didn't regret a thing. Because I built my career with my own hands. Out of paper, faxes, sleepless nights, and decisions that determine someone's paycheck. And if anyone thinks that can just be tossed aside, then they still haven't figured out what business is really built on. The first week after I got laid off, I still woke up at 6:30 out of habit. I made coffee, opened my laptop, and nothing. No emails, no urgent tasks. No panicked, "Martha, everything's falling apart, save us." Just silence. Even the spam seemed to know I was out of commission. I tried to convince myself this was a chance to rest. I read articles like, "How to Live Beyond the Office," "5 Ways to Find Yourself After Corporate Life," "The Power of Morning Meditation." I even tried yoga. By day 3, after pulling something between my shoulder blades, I told myself, "Nope, find yourself some other way." Then came the fun part, job hunting. I updated my resume, added everything I was supposed to. experience, achievements, key skills. I could have added a footnote under each line. Yes, I actually did this. Alone. In a crisis. Without ChatGPT. First interview a startup in San Francisco. CEO on Zoom. He's 27. Wearing a hoodie that says, code, sleep, repeat, sitting in a beanbag chair, sipping something green like he's in a commercial for healthy burnout. Martha or Martha? Martha, like Stewart, minus the cooking show. He didn't get the joke. He asked how I adapt to a fast-paced, flexible culture with a millennial mindset. I said, I worked in an environment where the only flexibility was my spine after 16 hours at a desk, and millennial mindset, to be honest, was what I used to fix on Friday nights after a missed deadline. He said I was overqualified. I wonder, is that a problem for surgeons too? Another interview, an HR girl with pink hair and a nose ring asked, how do you deal with toxic productivity? I said, first I save the company from collapse, then I make myself a cup of mint tea. She nodded sympathetically and typed something on her iPad. Never heard from her again. Someone else said I wasn't quite a cultural fit. I asked, you mean because I don't wear sneakers or make TikToks about your reports? He blushed and mumbled, well, yeah, I know. I'm a woman over 60. I have no desire to make mind maps in Miro just to state the obvious. I can manage crises, teams, and budgets, but I don't know what color to tag notes in Notion. Forgive me, for I have sinned. I applied to 37 companies. 18 never responded. 15 sent polite rejections. Thank you, but you're not quite what we're looking for. 2 invited me for interviews. Both chose someone more dynamic. One day, I sat on a bench by Lake Michigan with a notebook and wrote, what if I'm no longer needed? What if this really is the end? It was terrifying, painful, and honestly humiliating. But then I remembered. I remembered all the times people looked at me with doubt. When they said, you won't make it. When I walked into chaos and left behind structure, order, and results. So why would I believe now that some boys in hoodies get to decide I'm obsolete? Sarcasm became my shield. Now, when I get messages like, sorry, you're not quite what we're looking for, I reply in my head. No, you're looking for someone who'll work for peanuts and won't ask questions. Good luck, Jaden. But beneath it all, the apathy didn't go away. It's like a gray fog. It doesn't stop you from moving forward, but it never quite lifts. I didn't know what came next. But I knew this. If anyone thinks I'm finished, it's only because they haven't seen my second act. A month passed. My days turned into a mix of coffee, morning walks, and introspection. I even tried watercolor painting, ended up with a gloomy tree that I later realized was basically a self-portrait of my mood. And then one morning, 7:43 a.m. on a Saturday, I opened my phone and saw a message from Jenna. Jenna was a junior analyst, started as an intern under me 2 years ago. Smart girl, curious, a little unsure of herself. I used to tell her, don't be afraid of Excel, it's more afraid of you. She'd laugh, though I'm not sure she ever really got the joke. The message looked like it was typed in panic, on the run, one hand in a coffee cup. Martha, hi, sorry it's the weekend. Things are a total mess. I don't know where to look. The deadlines were yesterday. The reports don't match up. Ron left for Colorado and won't pick up. They said, we'll reassign, but no one knows what or how. One of the clients is threatening to leave. Linda's been crying for 2 days. Everything's falling apart without you. Please write if you can. I read it 3 times, then once more. And instantly, a golden corporate truth floated to the top of my mind. If they tell you everything's fine, the problems have already started. If they tell you everything's a mess, the fire's already burning. I stared at the screen and without meaning to said out loud, I warned them. I warned them that you can't just hand off reports like a hot potato. That automation, without process understanding, is just digital chaos. That if you remove the last person who understands why we're doing something, not just what the whole structure will collapse. But no one listened, because I didn't have a startup hoodie or digital transformation in every other sentence. At first, I wanted to ignore it, tell myself, this isn't your war anymore, Martha. Let them figure it out. But then, a second message came that evening. Short, Martha, the clients are demanding explanations and we don't even have the right numbers. They said they can't work without the old system. That's your system. I don't know what to do. I felt something stir inside, not smugness, not resentment. Something more like a kind of parental worry. You build something, you nurture it, you defend it, and then one day, you watch it fall apart in unskilled hands. I turned off the phone and took a deep breath. And the only thing that came to me honestly, sincerely was, well, I did warn them. But I only thought it. Because it wasn't time to say anything not yet. I looked out the window, where the sun was starting to dip behind the rooftops of Chicago, and the thoughts swirling in my head were no longer about the past but the future. Something was shifting, in the company, and in me. I was sitting on a bench in Grant Park, a cup of latte by my side, and a forgotten book in my lap. It was cold, but not cold enough to leave. I watched the people, someone walking their dog, someone running, someone just passing by. Everyone was going somewhere. And I was just sitting. On my phone, another message from Jenna. We really need you to just take a look, see where we went wrong. As if they didn't know. They went wrong the moment they decided I was the past. And so I sat there, talking to myself, in my head sometimes out loud. Thankfully, this is Chicago. People are used to a little weird. No one turned around. They pushed you out. They need you now. You've earned your peace. You hate doing nothing. You're too old. You're too smart to just disappear. And suddenly, I remembered a conversation I had with a therapist one my friend dragged me to. Private practice, lots of ficus plants and soft chairs. There was a cat. The cat's name was Steve. He looked at me over his glasses and said, Martha, are you sure you want to go back to a system that let you go? I answered, Steve, I don't want to go back to the system. I want to prove that it doesn't work without me. That's not the same thing. He nodded like he understood. Though, more likely, he'd just decided resistance was futile. Then he asked, What are you afraid of? And I told the truth. That they'll forget. That everything I did will be erased. That I'll become that woman people vaguely recall. What was her name again? Martha? I think she used to work here. Steve said nothing. Just handed me a candy, strawberry filled. Maybe that was his way of saying, you'll have to decide for yourself. So I decided, I won't go back. But I won't disappear either. Something in between. Something new. Something where I don't ask for a job. I create one. Sitting in the park, I wrote a single line in my notebook. Too old number. I'm too valuable to let you forget who I am. And as the lights of evening Chicago flickered to life, I knew what I'd do. I wouldn't go back. I'd go forward just far enough that they'd have no choice but to look back at me. It all started when I opened Google Sites. Yes, not Wix, not Squarespace, Google Sites. Because I'm old school. I like things clear, simple, and under control. Like quarterly reports. At the top white background. Centered my new business name. Still got it consulting. Experience doesn't age. I spent way too long picking the font. Some looked too playful, others screamed funeral home. In the end, I chose one that looked like Times New Roman but caffeinated. The logo? Made it myself in Canva. A light bulb with silver streaks. Let them know who they're dealing with. When I hit publish, it wasn't loud. No fireworks. Just that quiet sense of, now you come to me, not the other way around. The first clients came as they always do by accident. A small cafe in Milwaukee. The owner had heard about me through a friend who'd once read my old reports. In PDF, no less. I helped her set up a proper ordering system, automate inventory tracking, and most importantly, negotiate with suppliers, who'd been leading her around like a freshman at a street market. Then came a bakery in Madison. Then a wine bar in Austin. I didn't sell templates. I got into the guts of it. A strong business isn't about a trendy logo. It's about knowing why you're missing $2.17 at the end of the day. That's what I wrote on my blog. I wrote articles not for clicks, for clarity. How not to burn out when you still burn bright. Why innovation without understanding is just expensive mistakes. 5 reasons your CRM is just a Google sheet in lipstick. A few months in, one of my clients sent me a screenshot. A Slack group, digital strategy team from his old company. In the chat, a link to one of my articles. How to ruin a department in 3 months, mistakes no one notices. Underneath, the comments. Solid breakdown, someone knows their stuff. Yeah, sounds like the voice of reason. I nearly spilled my coffee. I recognize the tone. The phrasing. That sharp, dry precision. My voice. And suddenly irony. The same people who told me it was time to go? Now learning from me without even knowing it. My site started gaining traction. I added a testimonial section to the homepage. Marta did what our IT director couldn't in a year. She actually listened. Now we have order in our numbers and in our kitchen. I thought consulting was fluff. Turns out it's structure and salvation. The growth chart? Not a billion-dollar hockey stick. But real, steady, earned. I was being invited and I got to choose where I went. And you know what I felt? Control. Not revenge. Not gloating. Just a confidence I hadn't even had during my best office years. One night, I visited my old company's website just to see how they were doing. New project on the homepage. Big words, bright faces. But the eyes? Tired. And in that moment, I realized I didn't leave because they pushed me out. I left because I grew beyond what they could imagine. It was autumn when I woke up to a strange ping on LinkedIn. First, a message from an old colleague I hadn't spoken to in years. Second, a link to a Business Insider article. Ambitious pivot ends in disaster. What went wrong at Stratagrow? Stratagrow. My old workplace. My old home. My creation. Now, a case study in corporate collapse. They'd tried something bold, Stratagrow Next, I think it was called. New org architecture. A shiny new API. A leadership model where managers were renamed growth stream missionaries. So many words, so little grounding. And now the headlines. 3 major clients leave in 1 week. Internal chaos ensues. Investors demand strategic overhaul. CEO declines to comment. Analytics in freefall, reports contradict each other. I didn't feel joy. What I felt was confirmation. As if someone whispered, "Yes, Marta. You weren't just an archive, you were the glue." Someone leaked a Zoom recording onto YouTube. Grainy video, tired faces. In the center, Linda, the product director, trying to stay calm, but her voice shakes. We can't just push the deadline. We don't have a structure we can rely on. Another voice cuts in. Where are the docs for the old system? A third. Marta had them. After she left, no one knows where anything is. Pause. Then, silence. That digital kind cold, sterile, stretched too thin. Each person in their little square. And not a single one with an answer. Then Jenna's voice, thin, slightly cracked, but clear. She was the glue that held this all together. Without her, it just fell apart. I stared at the screen. And for the first time in a long while, I smiled without irony. Not because I won, but because someone finally said out loud what I'd always known. It was never about age. It was always about value. Later, a quote popped up in a business blog. In trying to look modern, Stratagrow discarded its core. Now they'll have to learn to walk again. And maybe call back the one who first taught them to stand. And that evening, an email came from procurement. Then another from the deputy director. And finally, one from the CEO. Short, cold, but with the key phrase, we'd like to discuss the possibility of collaboration. Collaboration. Not rehiring. Not returning. Not helping out temporarily. And that's when I knew. This time, I set the terms. They scheduled the meeting in the same office where I was once let go. Same floor, same glass walls. Only this time I was here on contract, not on the payroll. I walked into the lobby wearing a custom navy blue suit tailored in Portland. Thick framed glasses, hair pulled into a perfect updo. A tablet in my hand. Calculations, charts, answers in my head. And behind me? Nothing but experience. And a name they had asked to bring back. The security guard looked surprised. "Miss Marta, are you back with us?" I just nodded. No, I thought. You're with me now. The elevator doors closed, polished steel. And in it the reflection of a woman who no longer asks for a chance. She offers a solution. 5th floor. Same gray carpet, same glass dividers. But the air completely different. Tension. Fear. And just a trace of hope. I could feel it, like the faint smell of coffee from old machines. The main conference room door opened. I walked in. Silence. 12 people at the table. Jenna pale, lips tight. Linda avoiding my gaze. And Eric, the CEO, once a composed visionary, now a man who'd weathered a storm. They stood, unsure who should speak first. I stepped forward, placed the tablet on the table, and said calmly, "The conversation is different now." I sat down. Not at the edge, like before. At the center. Opened the presentation, nothing flashy, nothing trendy. Just facts. Just structure. The first slide read, "Restore stability, restore purpose, without panic." They listened. No interruptions. Someone even took notes. When I finished, Eric asked, quietly, "Terms?" I replied, "My schedule. My team. No corporate nonsense. I'm not here for status. I'm here to make this work again." Pause. He nodded. Accepted. And that's how it began. Not as a comeback. Not as a plea. But as a reboot. Not Marta returning. Marta brought in to save it all. It's strange how quickly an office changes when order returns. Not in the decor. Not in the KPIs. In the air. 2 weeks had passed since my unofficial return, and the hallways were filled with familiar phrases again. Let's start with the basics. Marta has a framework, take a look. Double-check the reports, she'll notice if they don't match. But one moment stood out. Late evening. Almost everyone gone. The only light in a small meeting room. I was at my laptop, fine-tuning a new task prioritization system. Then a voice. "Miss Marta, may I?" It was Noah, a junior analyst, maybe 22. I didn't know him, but he knew me. People like him had already read my Medium articles. "I saw you checking budgets manually." "Why? We've got a script for that." I smiled. The script works fine when the numbers behave. But when noise creeps in, only manual review shows where logic breaks down. He nodded, silent. Then a bit hesitant. "Is it true you used to write all those reports in Excel, without templates?" "Excel didn't even exist when I started," I said. "Before that calculator and ruler. Yes, I'm that old." He chuckled, not mockingly. With admiration. I slid the laptop toward him. "Want to see how to spot a missing $17 in a daily budget even when the CRM lies?" He sat beside me. And there we were. I explained a method I'd learned back when MTV still played music. He listened, took notes, absorbed every word. "You're like Wikipedia, just without all the extra noise," he said. And that's when it hit me. This was my final form of satisfaction. Not applause. Not charts going up. But this. Someone born when I was already getting awards for accuracy. Looking at me not as a relic, but as a source. I'm not mentoring the youth. I'm just doing the work. With them, not above them. And every time one of them asks, "Why do you do it that way?" I smile and say, "Because that method stood the test of time. And I've lived that time. Podcast intro, soft jazz music, host's voice. Welcome to Work Reimagined, a podcast about people who change the rules of the game. Today's guest is someone whose name has become a synonym for resilience and common sense in business blogs. A woman who was fired for being too old, and a year later saved that very same company. Please welcome Martha Bennett. Me, calmly with a hint of irony. Hello, I did put effort into my formidable return, so I'm glad it's working. Host laughs. You know, your story is almost like a movie. Despair, consulting, the fall of a giant, and then you walking into the room like Batman. Huge me. Just without the cape. Though, it would have been useful their air conditioning still runs on Arctic mode. Tyne, host. But seriously, what have you learned this past year? Me, after a short pause. That age is a filter. People look at you and see either wisdom or outdated thinking. It's not about your age, it's about their imagination. But I also learned something else. If you're truly good at what you do, time works for you, not against you. Tyne, host. And still, if you could go back to the day you were fired, would you change anything? Huge me. Number. Because then I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have realized how much I still have to give, and more importantly, who I am when no one hands me a title. Now I don't have a title, I have a name, and a reputation. And, that's even better. Tyne, host. Your advice to the younger generation, to those just starting their careers? Huge me. Listen to your elders. Not because they're older, but because they've already stood where you're standing. And don't build a career on LinkedIn. Build it in the moment, in Excel, in negotiations, in situations where no one praises you but everything depends on you. Tyne, host. Final question. What would you say to the people who fired you? Me smiling, leaning slightly into the mic. You said I was too old, maybe. But without me, you were too naive. Pause, silence. Jazz outro. Music fades out. Camera pans to the side. I walk out of the studio, close my laptop, and head to my next client, a small, family-owned bakery in Chicago. Life goes on. And now I choose who I build it with. The end.